Welcome to For the Common Good with Juanita, a show where we inform, inspire, and empower our communities, our businesses, and people just like you. I'm excited about the show today because we're talking to our guests representing the United Way, and we're talking about Project Inclusion, and we're going to learn more about that. Please help me welcome my guest to the show, J.R. Locke, who is Director of Project Inclusion.
Hello there, Juanita. How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And then we have Mr. Joe Brooks, who's the Director of Equity Advancement from the United Way Southampton Roads. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Juanita. Happy New Year. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to start with you, Mr. Brooks, in talking about the United Way. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and perhaps the role of the United Way in the community.
Absolutely. As you said before, my name is Joe Brooks. I'm the Director of Equity Advancement at the United Way Southampton Roads, and I also lead the efforts for the African American Leadership Society, which is a membership organization under the Greater United Way flag, comprised of over 200 professionals, regardless of race, that are passionate about uplifting communities here in the 757.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yes, and also in large part with the United Way, we work hand in hand with the organization in terms of advancing equity here in Hampton Roads. So each day, every day, we come face to face with addressing disparities that exist in our community. And when we look at our current, pandemic and the health crisis, it's further deepened the inequities that already have existed in our community. And we're looking at ways on how we can help people. We don't want to go back to normal. We want to build back better, here in our community, and we want to help all residents be able to thrive here in Hampton Roads. So what are some of the things, that we're doing? As I told you before, we come face to face with addressing disparities each day through our programs, whether it's United for Children or working with veterans and their families. Our United for Children program was specifically designed, to address disparities that exist in the St. Paul community in Norfolk, to be able to help children increase their reading scores with their education, and also to provide support for families in terms of our after-school programs. So those are things that we're working on. We also have our Missions United program, which provides comprehensive services for veterans here in the area and helping them to meet all of their needs. And also our Project Inclusion, which is an award-winning 13-week governance program, and JR will talk a little bit about that later on in the program. So we're always looking, for ways and opportunities to help the community. We recently launched a Community Connections series, which is an initiative in which we're looking to be able to promote tableside conversations with residents and stakeholders in the community. We want to be able to gain their aspirations and goals for the community. We also want to find out what are their issues and concerns. And we want to have over 100 conversations in the next 6 months, directly with residents to gain a grassroots approach of what is going on in the community. But also we want to be able to, find out, what are some of their issues and concerns, and we'll be able to share that information with them later on in the year.
Well, that's awesome. So you have a lot of connections with the organizations and the communities.
Yes. That is correct.
To understand the needs specifically of that community.
Absolutely. We work directly, with agencies, in the community. Church groups, all the different community stakeholders. I talked about the health crisis, earlier. It was about this time last year that we began hearing, about the virus and the health implications for people who contracted it. Because of that, we launched the Coronavirus Recovery Fund and a hotline, a corresponding hotline. Since that time, we've been able to invest over $2 million to provide financial assistance directly to residents, also agencies who are boots on the ground, helping people in need, and also to plan for long-term recovery initiatives.
Wow, very interesting. Mr. Locke, he spoke about Project Inclusion, and I know you are the director of Project Inclusion. Tell me a little bit about what exactly is that program?
All right, well, first of all, when you say Mr. Locke, I started looking around and see my dad here. JR is fine.
JR, okay.
And so Project Inclusion really is an exciting program that was launched by United Way of Southampton Roads back in 1997. So this year we're happy to be celebrating our 25th anniversary. And the whole purpose of Project Inclusion was actually rolled out by United Way of America, which is headquartered in Alexandria. And currently they have management oversight with over 1,800 United Ways across the world.
Wow.
And basically it's from a branding perspective, because each United Way, which a lot of people are not aware of, it's its own entity. And so United Way of Southampton Roads, they found out about this leadership program that had been rolled out by United Way of America, and they called it Project Blueprint, which was a blueprint to diversity. And so once we learned of the program, we decided, hey, this is something that we want to launch in our community. And as we thought about the real purpose of it, it was to help those nonprofit agencies diversify their boards of directors. Because the studies that had been done reflected that many of those agencies that were under United Way's umbrella, while they were serving 40 to 50% of a minority beneficiary, when they looked at the board of directors, it looked quite a bit different.
Didn't reflect the community.
It did not reflect the community in which they were serving. So this whole idea about, well, why don't we have a program that's going to help recruit more minorities from the community and not only help place them on these nonprofit boards, but train them to be more effective when serving on a board. And so we launched the initiative, and it was really interesting, Juanita, that here in this area, Virginia, is considered part of the South. And so it was some reluctance to start a diversity program here in the Hampton Roads area.
Bold, huh?
It was a bold issue at that time. And so there was some reluctance on whether or not the area was ready for a program like this. But United Way of Southampton Roads was really being bold in their efforts to really make a difference in the area of diversity and those agency boards. And so we went ahead with it, and we targeted 35 participants. And I tell you, that first class, we had over 100 people to apply.
I want to hold that.
Okay.
We're going to hear more when we come back. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Don't you go anywhere. Welcome back to For the Common Good with Juanita. And I've been talking to JR Locke and Mr. Joe Brooks, and they're from the United Way, and we're talking about some of their programs. One such program is Project Inclusion. And I want to talk more about Project Inclusion, JR, when you talk about the number of people that were interested in being part of Project Inclusion and having over 100 applicants. What was all the excitement about? Why were people so excited about this opportunity?
Well, I guess people were ready for an initiative like this Because when you think about the value that Project Inclusion brings to an organization, it's really empowering individuals to have a say in their community. And serving on a board is a pretty important responsibility when you think about it, because board meetings typically are comprised of a small group of people, anywhere between 6, and some boards have up to 40 people. But the average board is anywhere between 12 and 15 members. But they represent a community. And there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that's in that community that can't participate in a board meeting. And so they're relying on those few individuals to be their eyes and ears for how their communities will be impacted. And when you think about it, Juanita, there's not many things that exist in our life that's not governed by somebody sitting around a table making a decision about our lives. I mean, the furniture in this room is governed by some manufacturing board that determines what materials are going to be used in order to manufacture it properly. The state of Virginia have boards and commissions that number in excess of 500 various boards. We have an egg board, we have the poultry board, we have a water board. I mean, there's so many different boards, but those boards are comprised of individuals like you and I who are sitting on those boards making a decision to impact somebody else's life. And so with Project Inclusion, we just felt like it was time to offer something like that because of the disparity in the diversity that existed. And I'm really happy to say the last time we actually surveyed the various boards, and United Way actually manages, provide funding, I should say, to over 60 to 65 various agencies in the community. And when we surveyed those boards initially in 1997, it was about 22% representation of minorities serving on those boards, which was higher than I thought, actually. But the most recent survey resulted in about 30% diversity on those boards. And so we can see that the needle was being moved, and it's not bad when you consider that minorities make up about 30 to 35% of the population of Hampton Roads out of 1.2 million people.
So the program runs for 13 weeks.
Yes.
And is it once a week or every day, or how does that work?
It's once a week, every Tuesday, for 2 hours from 3:30 to 5:30. And oftentimes people ask me, well, why can't we run on a Saturday? And why can't we run it at night so that they can participate? But it doesn't matter what time we have it, somebody's not going to be able to attend.
Right.
And so we did survey our corporate partners to ask them if they were going to send any of their employees to a training like this, what is the most optimal time? And it was actually during the week, during the daytime. And I think those employees appreciated that because it gives them an opportunity to leave work early.
So how do you choose your candidates? I mean, because you had 100 people apply, so you had to be you have a very screening system in place, selection process.
That's a great question, because initially, that first year, you just had to fill out an application and send in your check. And at the time, the program was $50, and which is not much more than that now because it's $125, but that's still a bargain when you compare it to some similar leadership programs across the country that's offered under the United Way umbrella, that they're in excess of $1,000. And so United Way of Southampton Roads purposely wanted to keep the cost low so the cost wouldn't be a barrier for people who wanted to get this type of training. But when we added an essay component to the application, for some reason the application
Nobody wants to do an essay. No matter how old you get, you never want to do an essay. Okay.
Yeah. And so it got down into a much more manageable number, because I really didn't like the idea of so many people being on the waiting list who wanted to be a part of it. Yeah. And so it pretty much averaged itself out that we were getting 30 to 35 applicants every year. And that's how many we've averaged. But even to fast forward to today and having to go through this pandemic environment, as you know, has impacted everybody's programmatic structures. And so this is the first class that we've had to go virtual as opposed to in person. Now, there's been some pros and cons about the pandemic. A lot of cons. But one of the pros is that it allowed us to go outside of the borders of Hampton Roads. Right. Because basically anybody can participate because it's virtual. And I'm really happy to say that our last count, which we had to cut it off, we have 53 applicants that have enrolled in the program.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So in terms of once you're enrolled in the program, at the end of the 13 weeks, you get a certificate, you get recognition, and kind of something that can follow you to, wherever you go, saying that you've gone through this training, leadership training.
Correct. You get a certificate, graduation certificate, but the most valuable part of that is that we then work with those nonprofit agencies to get the individuals placed.
Ooh. That's important.
That's important.
That's the important.
Because as you know, being on a board is not something you can invite yourself to. Maybe like crashing a party.
I work with a lot of organizations, though, that have a very difficult time finding board members.
Yes.
And then once they're coming on, for those board members to really understand their fiduciary responsibility. So I love this. Look, we could talk more. We definitely need to talk more about this, but we've got to take a break. But I also want to talk to Mr. Brooks about this African American Leadership Society and find out more information about that. We've got some good stuff here. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Common Good with Juanita. And we've been talking about the United Way and some of the services of the United Way. And I wanted to ask you, Mr. Brooks, about the African American Leadership Society. Exactly what is that? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's an organization comprised of over 200 professionals that are passionate about uplifting marginalized neighborhoods here in the 757. And one of the goals of the United Way Southampton Roads and the African American Leadership Society is to mobilize the community, to bring people together of all different backgrounds to have conversations. And one of the conversations we wanted to start was around equity, equality, and racism. So we launched our virtual panel series on advancing equity. We had our first virtual panel back in November, and it was led by local faith-based leaders. And they were talking about equity and the damaging effects of racism in our community, and also a pathway to healing. And that was well attended by over 150 people. And they came at it from a spiritual context. We had our last panel series on January 28th, and that was on building equity in our community. And it was, the election is over, now what? So we have a new administration, okay, but regardless of political affiliation, how are we going to advance equity across our nation and also the community? And that specific virtual panel talked about, equity, inequalities from a historical, context, and also how can people get involved, more importantly, to be able, to affect our current landscape. And then a couple of days ago, we had our COVID town hall, which talked about demystifying, the vaccine, and also talked about, the virus.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that don't want to take the vaccine. We call it vaccine hesitancy. They don't want to take it for a lot of reasons, especially in the African American community. There's a history there that they're afraid really to take the vaccine. So you're addressing some of those issues, it sounds like.
No, absolutely. So, when you look at Black and brown communities from an historical context, there are fears that come out of, the Tuskegee experiments, with syphilis, But our panelists, which was a group of leading local infectious disease experts, and physicians, they talked about the vaccine, the differences. They answered questions about herd immunity, the side effects. And they were able to successfully demystify some of the fears and urban legends that exist in our community.
Wow.
And actually, if I could add to that, I mean, they demystified it to the point that Joe's team had a pre and post question in the town hall. And the question was, how many of you have had the vaccine, plan to take it, or don't plan to take it? And there were a number of no's before the program. And after the program, those no's disappeared.
Those no's disappeared, right.
Really?
And that was the goal, to educate the community, right?
There's a lot of that needs to be done,
Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent. Thinking about the value to the community of all these programs, and I know that sometimes trying to get community leaders involved in more and doing more, and sometimes people just don't want to be involved or have time. Just talk a little bit about the value in the community, what the changes that we can see in the community as a result of something like Project Inclusion. How can that change the landscape of the community and also, people, the lives of people?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that it could be easily described in a manner that when you're in a boardroom, and you're talking about a particular topic, oftentimes the results of the conversation is comprised of the people who are like each other. If you're sitting in a room with a homogeneous group of folks who are basically from the same neighborhood or same background, same experiences, then you're going to get a common set of circumstances or recommendations that they have. But when you add people from a variety of backgrounds, whether it's ethnic, whether it's gender, whether it's sex, when you mix in the diversity of thought, now you have ideas that's going to be more wide-ranging that could possibly impact people in the community that otherwise would not have been thought of. And that's what diversity brings to organizations. And it's interesting how diversity has evolved over the years, because initially, people were really adverse to it because they felt like this was affirmative action. Nobody can tell us what to do. But it wasn't that it was trying to tell you what to do. It was really trying to tell executives, particularly in these corporations, how diversity brings value. But now some of the studies that have been shown and been conducted clearly shows that those companies who are leading their industries are profiting more, they have higher stock value, they have a higher customer satisfaction rate, and it's been attributed to the diversity initiative that they've implemented. And so it has made a tremendous impact in our communities.
Diversity pays.
Absolutely.
That is awesome.
And inclusion pays even more.
Inclusion pays as well. Wow, this is really excellent. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to give to our viewers about Project Inclusion, about the United Way? Anything you'd like to share with them?
I would only like to add that for this year's class, it's full. And so unfortunately, if anybody's interested, when they see your program, we won't be able to accommodate you this year. But certainly, if you just go on United Way's website, which is www.unitedwayshr for southamptonroads.org. You can provide your information and we can put you on a waiting list for next year's class.
That is awesome.
Yeah, well, we're going to continue to do the great work here in our community, the United Way, and the African American Leadership Society to build our equity muscle. We were awarded a $400,000 scholarship from USAA for students of color to pursue careers in the STEM field, and 50% of those scholarships are going to go to women, and there's obviously a void in that field. But there's so much work to be done in our community, but we just look forward to building our equity muscle and also to listen in to residents in the community. And if you want information on joining ALS, please go to the United Way Southampton Roads website to receive that information.
Thank you so very much.
Thank
JR, Joe, thank you for being on the show today.
We appreciate you having us.
A wealth of information. And thank you for tuning in to For the Common Good with Juanita.